A 26-year-old black waitress working at Backsin's diner had no idea her life would completely change following her brief encounter with Shaquille O'Neal, aka Big Shaq. The black waitress, Jasmine, was working the evening shift and attending to her customers just like every other evening, with a contagious smile and lovely compliments to make her customers look good. She was loved by many at the diner. The Backsin's diner became the favorite refuge for young and older locals who enjoyed their burger recipe with some French fries. Located in a quiet part of the small town of Livermore in San Francisco, many also go there to relax and drench themselves in their favorite sport, basketball. But for Jasmine, Backsin's diner was more than a workplace. She had built a family around her co-workers and customers. She worked double shifts, saving every dime for her little brother's college fund. Every regular knew her by name, and she treated every customer with kindness. The moment her life would change completely was near. The bell above the diner's door jingles. It was a customer no one ever expected, even at such an odd hour. Jasmine thought it was just a regular customer walking in, but she was wrong. As she glanced up, her heart skipped a beat when she saw a tall, broad-shouldered man, one of the most celebrated basketballers in the world, the big Aristotle, Big Shaq, walking in with a smile on his face. Big Shaq was well known in San Francisco as an NBA analyst on TNT and former player of the Los Angeles Lakers. But that didn't stop Jasmine from freezing at the sight of him. The star dressed as if he was trying to stay unrecognizable from the public. He wore a casual hoodie with some sneakers, as that would help at all. The locals at the counter felt his presence all around the room as they all stared with their mouths and whispered with their eyes. Jasmine was a huge fan. She had seen him on television and internet videos multiple times, taking a shoot on the court during his prime. Still, her pulse quickened because she had never imagined a public figure like Big Shaq walking into her quiet little diner. His presence was a big deal to the black waitress and the other regular customers because they were huge fans of his. Jasmine didn't let her nervousness get a full hold of her. She walked up to his table with her friendly personality and composure and decided to get his orders. Jasmine has been working at Backsin's diner for 4 years, and the menu and orders have been infused deep into her memory. She confidently said, "Good evening, what can I get for you tonight?" Looking closely at who was taking the order, Big Shaq displayed a cute smile that immediately put Jasmine at ease. "Just a double-sized burger and maybe some French fries with a drink," Big Shaq replied. Jasmine then left with the order taken, wearing a bright smile despite the nervousness and tension building within her. As she walked to her counter, she wasn't the only one nervous. The locals didn't stop murmuring. Some of the locals were smiling, while others wondered what someone like Big Shaq was doing in a diner like this. Jasmine didn't want to keep the new customer waiting, so she took his order from the counter straight to his table. Trying to act normal, she placed the burger, French fries, and a Coke drink before him. Big Shaq thanks her with his usual smile before looking away out the window in deep thought. Can someone like Big Shaq have someone in particular who could keep him so lost in thought? Jasmine wondered as she headed back to her position. He might just be tired of all the work and trips he had to make to find himself at the diner. She continued in thought. Not everyone in the world would have the same love for Big Shaq. Heck, not every local in the diner would have similar admiration with Jasmine. One of the older regular customers of the diner, George, didn't share the same fancy with Jasmine and the other locals. George was a huge fan of Kobe Bryant, a longtime rival of Big Shaq. Their rivalry was characterized by heated arguments, physical altercations, and championship victories. George is known for his bluntness and overly critical opinions about some subject matters, one of which is Big Shaq. Jasmine looks on as George approaches Big Shaq's table. George said, "Excuse me, aren't you that NBA guy, Big Shaq?" Big Shaq didn't mind the deep, cutting, cracking voice of guffy old George, he affirmed with a smile. With crossed arms and a twisted face, George said he had been reading up on Big Shaq but hadn't seen his impact on society, despite making millions throughout his career. George, speaking as if he was trying to make a strong point in a debate competition, questioned Big Shaq. He claimed Big Shaq was not helping his community despite earning millions of dollars. He accused Big Shaq of being stingy with his money. Jasmine looked on with disgust at George. She didn't just admire Big Shaq because he was famous or talented on the court. She did so because of his kind gestures and philanthropic work for the public, which George obviously knows nothing about. This accusation from George really stung Big Shaq's heart, but he still kept a calm demeanor. Big Shaq tried to debunk such a statement. He explained how he had supported education programs, built basketball courts for little children, and helped fund charities. Not feeling defeated, George scoffed, claiming such actions to be for PR's sake, to put him in the public's good books. Now, that sounds absurd. He continued, "You big shot only care about your public image." Now, this conversation made some customers nod in agreement with what George was saying. Jasmine, who was clearing plates at the next table, glanced at Big Shaq and felt the urge to step in for the ex-basketballer and end George's unfair, harsh words. There was no way Jasmine could stand still with deaf ears while someone berated someone she respected. She neglected the popular business motto, "Customers are always right," and went on ahead to confront George. She felt that George was misinformed and she needed to educate him before the situation escalated. Gathering all the courage she could get, she sided with Big Shaq, stating that he had done much good for the people than anyone could dream of. She also narrated how he was honored with the Humanitarian of the Year award for raising millions of dollars for charity and creating pathways for underserved youth through the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation. She sure didn't mind the nervousness bubbling inside her. After saying everything, the room was quiet for the longest it had been for 4 years. All eyes were on Jasmine. Trying to dead the awkward silence, George countered and said the cliché statement, "You believe all that? How do you know he isn't just doing it to make the headlines because actions speak louder than words?" Jasmine then shared a testimony she had read about. She stated that she had read about children whose lives had changed because of his foundation. "He doesn't have to do any of that, but he does because he cares." She roared. This made Shaq, observing all that was happening, lock eyes on Jasmine. Jasmine just couldn't stop. She spoke with courage and conviction, just like the preacher in her local church. With her speech, many were moved and easily changed their view on someone like Big Shaq, while the few remained skeptical, like George. We live in a world where people with the means don't always step up, but when someone like Shaq does, it is not fair to bring them down. Shaq looked up at her with surprise and gratitude all over his face. George, who was quite embarrassed, blustered and returned to his seat, muttering under his breath. Jasmine remained free-spirited, but had no idea what her little heartfelt speech would cost her. The damage had already been done, or so they thought. The owner of the Backsin's diner, Mr. Jacob, stepped out from the kitchen with a dark countenance. Jasmine noticed this, and immediately her heart sank deep. With each step towards her, she felt a cold sensation increasing. Mr. Jacob called her forth and said in a low voice, "You don't exchange words with customers, especially not regulars like George." "I was not arguing," she said in a trembling voice. She had tried to keep this job for 3 good years, and losing it for a reason like this would really devastate her. "I was standing up for someone who didn't deserve to be treated that way." The diner's owner, unwilling to give in to her reason, stated that it was a business, not a debate club. He explained that George and the other regulars were the backbone of the place, and if they were upset, the diner would lose its loyalty. According to him, he couldn't allow that to happen and concluded that it would be best for her to find another job. Somehow, she hoped it wouldn't warrant her being fired, but there was nothing she could do to convince Mr. Jacob. "You are firing me?" Jasmine said, with a severe blood rush running through her veins. "You are firing me for defending someone?" she continued. Mr. Jacob said no more as he gave her a few days to transition. Jasmine didn't know what to do or where to start from. She tried to hold her tears, but her blurry eye gave it away. She tried holding her head up high, refusing to control her emotions completely. Big Shaq had risen, noticing the exchange between Jasmine and her boss. He didn't have to be a genius to see what had happened. He wore the face of regret. Big Shaq apologized to Jasmine quietly as she passed by, gathering her things and leaving. "You didn't have to do that, but it meant a lot," he said. Jasmine didn't say a word but responded with a nod. She wore a faint smile to keep the same energy. "You're welcome," she said, forcing it out of her mouth. That night, she lay in bed, wondering how she'd break the news to her little brother. Jasmine woke up the next morning, having a flashback of what had happened the day before. She couldn't believe she was fired, but that was the reality. She felt like her world was crumbling with her in it, which wasn't her usual self. Her calm, sweet, smiling nature turned sore. She had a deep sense of loss, losing a place she had known to love all her life. She would indeed miss her daily routine of producing fruit juice and serving cheeseburgers and French fries to her lovely local customers, or they used to be. She could remember the deep stare and silent judgment from the regulars that cut deeper than two-edged swords. She could still feel the heaviness in her chest because she was easily laid off by a place of love and peace. The event of the previous night continued playing in her mind. Backsin's diner had been a place she called her second home, a safe place with frequent laughter and friends. But it was all taken away because she stood for what was true and refused to see someone, in this case Big Shaq, being bullied. She began to doubt her reasoning. She then thought standing up for Big Shaq was never worth it. Her house rent was due, and without money the house owner wouldn't care if she did well or not. Not knowing the way forward, Jasmine geared up herself to go to the diner one last time to collect her final paycheck. She had developed a phobia of going back to Backsin's diner. The thought of going back made her tummy rumble, but it was not like she had any other choice. She needed the money. Walking through the quiet streets of San Francisco, she didn't even pay attention to the beautiful golden glow from the rising sun bathing her. Her mind was full of thoughts and possible escape routes. She planned not to give up, no matter the situation. She cheered herself up, reminding herself that she would continue speaking the truth regardless of the outcome. Before she stepped foot into the diner, she noticed something unusual. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom was packed right outside the restaurant. The vehicle completely looked out of place, with its polished exterior shining in the sunlight. It seemed out of place against the diner's faded backdrop. Jasmine's facial expression went from wowed to total confusion. Stepping into the diner, she noticed a complete silence, which was against the usual humming of conversations. Something was off. This must be connected to the sedan she saw outside. Scanning through the room, Jasmine's eye landed on Big Shaq, who was seated casually in one of the booths. Big Shaq was relaxed but had a distinct aura that could be felt around the room, even more than his previous appearance. This time, he wore his simple attire, jeans, a sweatshirt, and a customized face cap that says, Shaq Sport. This dressing didn't stop the room from noticing his presence. Mr. Jacob was dumbfounded. As Jasmine stepped into the diner, the regulars flickered their eyes between Jasmine and Big Shaq. Big Shaq called Jasmine with his warm, calm voice, asking if they could have a little talk together. Jasmine was indeed caught by surprise. She never expected Big Shaq to be at the diner the following day, with the way he was treated. As she walked up to Shaq, she couldn't help but notice the staring eyes piercing their soul deep. But she didn't care about that. Meeting Big Shaq at the booth, she slid into the booth across from him and sat down. Big Shaq picked up the conversation. He said he respected what Jasmine did for him that particular night. He couldn't stop thinking about how she stood up for him, even though she didn't have to. Jasmine casually told him that he deserved someone to stand up for him, no matter the circumstance. Leaning forward slightly, he said, "What you did took courage. It showed me the kind of person you are. Someone who stands up for what is right, even when it is hard. That's rare, and it's something I deeply admire." Jasmine was confused about where the conversation was heading, but had high hopes. Tilting her head a bit in confusion, she asked him the reason why he came to look for her. Big Shaq didn't want to beat around the bush any further. He tried to give her a second chance. Shaq had shared the story of her kindness on social media. The story didn't wait a minute before going viral. Thousands of people praised Jasmine's selflessness. But that wasn't all. She found the exact favor she needed. Shaq had made a few calls. First, he got her a new job at an upscale restaurant in his hometown, Newark, New Jersey. He made sure it had better pay, better working hours, and a real chance to grow an upscale personal business. Secondly, Shaq, who had done a little background check on Jasmine, knew about her brother in college. He decided to set up a scholarship fund for him. And finally, he personally handed her a check big enough to cover her family's expenses for years. She finally broke into a wide, tearful smile and said, "I don't know how to thank you." Shaq responded that she had already did, as she was kind to him when she didn't need to. He then exits the premises right after giving Jasmine a pat on her back. George, who was, of course, present, couldn't hold it as he looked in disbelief. The diner owner behind the counter was filled with guilt as he handed her paycheck to her. As Shaq was leaving, he looked back at Jasmine and told her to get her luggage ready, as a member of his team would pick her up for the morning flight to New Jersey. Backsin's diner wasn't the end she had feared. It was the beginning of a life filled with purpose that one chance encounter with Big Shaq had changed. It was filled with hope from hopelessness, joy from joblessness, and happiness from sadness. This indeed proves that sometimes standing up for what's right opens doors to a brighter future. Does standing up for what's right always lead to something better, or is it sometimes too risky? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video.